So Jake Paul versus Mike Platinum Perry is in the works, and they just went on Ariel Helwani's show to do a kind of virtual face-off. It was really fun. I listened to it today at work, and I took down some notes. I wanted to talk about that and the matchup, so let's get into it. Now, I'll start off talking about the interview. Weird thing off the bat was that both these guys seemingly just got right into the trash talk. There wasn't like a point where they said, okay, there's a setup, you could check out this fight at a certain point. It was all Helwani setting things up. And immediately, which is something I haven't seen before, Jake and Mike were at each other's throats talking about who was less educated, who went to private schools, who did what. It was honestly very entertaining, and I will say this is the closest I've seen Jake to actually being charismatic on camera in a long, long time. I was surprised with how much he was kind of making me chuckle. Now, say what you want about Jake, right? He's trailblazing for other YouTube boxers. In a space right now that's kind of dwindling, he's still active, which is really, really cool and something that I feel like you should appreciate. He's not been historically the best trash talker. He comes off of cringy. I call into mind all the Tyron Woodley kind of like lead ups to their fights and all that different type of stuff. Jake has never been a guy to kind of like lead in the charisma department.
I think deep down, I see him breathing right now. I see it through his shirt. His heart rate is sky high right now. I think deep down he knows what's coming, but he doesn't want to face that.
Mike Perry is much more naturally funny. I feel like in this one, he kind of was down at Jake's level a little bit. He had some swings, he had some misses, and this is in no way like a reflection of how I feel about Mike Perry. I think he's awesome, and I think he's great for the sport, and I think it's great that Jake picked Mike Perry for his next fight. That's huge. They set up a bunch of stuff, a potential bare knuckle fight in the future, a potential PFL MMA fight in the future. I hope I get to cover Jake Paul's MMA debut at the PFL. That would be awesome. But yeah, really a lot of good setup. I think the shell of good trash talks there was talks of sparring. Perry claims that he got the later rounds. He does say that Jake caught him with a good shot, so there might be a little bit more validity to what Perry was saying, but Jake claims the exact same thing. He says that he rocked Perry and that he was dominant in those rounds. But without further ado, we've got 27 days, at least as of this recording, left until the fight. Let's talk about the breakdown. Jake Paul, a very, very hard hitter, especially now that he's bulked up to 200. Perry has said that he is also bulking up to 200 for this one. He says there's going to be no rehydration clause, no discrepancies for Jake, so it should be on paper an even match. Perry, though, is an absolute dog. Now, for those longtime fans of the channel, we covered Mike Perry a long time ago, and the way that he fights, boxing is one of his strong suits, absolutely. He's a decent wrestler and a decent grappler, but realistically, when you talk about who Mike Perry is as a fighter, boxing and bare knuckle boxing now is going to come to the forefront of your mind. And I see so many people talking about the fact that boxing, like traditional westernized boxing, and of course bare knuckle boxing are different. It's different worlds. It's a different style. Even the clinching is different. If you guys ever watch any of the free FUBU prelims for BKFC, I highly suggest you do. It's very interesting. They almost have their own style of boxing that they do. And Jake, of course, a very accomplished wrestler, goes into the sport of boxing, has been knocking people out left and right. Jake's got power. You could say whatever you want about his technique, about how he's picked guys that aren't very mobile, guys that are older. That's a very valid and fair concern to have about who Jake has been fighting. One thing I do believe we've seen though from Jake is the grit to go into the later rounds, to drop guys later on in fights, and the non-hesitancy to kind of just get out there and go. Jake's very, very good at that, and you could tell he has a respect for the sport. Sometimes his cardio just gives out on him. I've seen him gassed in fights. But even after that threshold point, he still keeps pushing, because that's what he puts into the fight game. Technique-wise, does he have the defense to hold up against the volume of Mike Perry? And I do believe Mike Perry is going to push a pace on Jake. I mean, he said it enough himself. He's trying to smother Jake in a big way in this fight. I don't know. I don't know if Jake's foot placement or his hand placement or in general his defensive head movement, any of that is going to be enough to really keep Mike Perry off of him when Mike is going to, and you can quote me on this, when Mike, I believe, is going to be throwing 4 or 5 punch combinations, is going to be walking forward. Of course, walking forward leads you to counter shots. I just don't know if Jake's going to be able to reliably backpedal while also keeping his hands up and firing back at the same time. I don't think that Jake has the coordination to do so. He catches guys with really good shots, but I just want you guys to keep in mind, those guys are not mobile. They don't move well. Tommy Fury moved well, and you see what happened there. I mean, from what I can remember from that Tommy Fury fight, Jake was loading up and trying to hit him with the overhand, trying to hit him with the uppercut, and Tommy was just using basic combinations, getting inside, establishing dominance in the pocket with Jake, and it was working. Now imagine a guy that's a much more accomplished striker with better power, and more pressure, you're going to get Mike Perry. Mike Perry, I think, has got Jake in the cardio department. I see Mike Perry being able to last far longer into a fight than Jake. And again, that heart from Jake is fantastic, but it's Mike Perry we're talking about. I don't think we've seen Jake get tested the way we will most likely see him get tested in this one. And as a credit to Jake, I've said that about most of his past fights. Didn't really say that about Andre August, and I certainly didn't say that about Ryan Borland, but the ones before that, Anderson Silva, and a little bit against Nate Diaz, I did and I still do feel like at least Jake is trying to go out and test himself against these guys. And that's what he has in front of him. A guy in Mike Platinum Perry is going to be a huge, huge test. Jake mentioned in the interview that he's working a lot on turning his hips, generating more power. I gotta be honest, I don't necessarily know if that's the way to go. I feel like if you're Jake, you gotta be worrying about footwork. You gotta worry about being able to box backwards. That's gonna be, I think, major for Jake in this fight. Because again, he has power. And if you get your footwork to the point where, and I'm literally right up against the wall right now, if you could step back and still plant and throw a shot down while keeping this arm up here, you could stand, if you're Jake, a good chance of knocking Mike Perry out. But from what I've seen from Jake, he does not have a solid enough foundation to really stave Mike Perry off. I think the hook should be a big tool for Jake this fight, using it kind of to circle out. Another big thing is if Jake's going to be on the back foot like I think he is this fight, it's going to get real tiring real quickly because I've sparred with guys who are absolute buzzsaws and don't stop hitting you with combinations. And when you're backpedaling the entire round for 3 minutes, it is absolutely draining. I do have Mike Perry winning via either knockout or decision. I could see Jake cracking him with a big shot, but unless he's working on something footwork-wise, I think Perry's going to do enough to get inside. He's got fantastic boxing, like I said again, to crack Jake and put him away potentially. Another big thing is the clinch. I completely forgot to talk about that. The physicality that Mike Perry's learned from BKFC in the clinch is going to be, I think, huge in this fight. And then in terms of standing in the middle of the ring, I think it's a 50-50 toss-up, honestly. Both guys have power. Both guys are tough. This is an interesting fight. But that's all I got for now. Maybe I'll do a more detailed breakdown as we get closer to the fight. Without further ado, guys, this has been your boy, the combat consultant, the soundboard god, Jacob Cooperman. I'll see you in the next one. Deuces.